took a graveyard shift job restoring audio tapes inside an abandoned government archive buried beneath a decommissioned military bunker somewhere far outside the city. And from the moment I arrived, the place felt deeply wrong because the bunker seemed disconnected from the outside world entirely, with no phone signal, no internet, no windows, only endless concrete corridors humming softly with failing electricity while old fluorescent lights flickered overhead like they were struggling to stay alive. But the pay was absurdly high for such simple work, and all I had to do was digitize damaged cassette recordings recovered from the lower storage levels where a fire had supposedly destroyed most of the archive years earlier. Although nobody explained why certain hallways were sealed shut with steel blast doors covered in deep claw marks, or why every employee badge I found inside the locker room belonged to someone officially declared missing decades ago, yet I ignored all of it until around 1:40 a.m. when I discovered an unlabeled cassette hidden beneath my desk with the words, "Do not play after midnight," written across it in faded black ink. And despite the warning, curiosity got the better of me because the bunker had become so unnaturally silent that hearing any human voice at all felt comforting. But the moment the tape began playing, I realized something was horribly wrong because it wasn't music or recorded speech. It was a live conversation between terrified workers, whispering about people appearing inside the bunker who were not listed on any staff records, followed by distant emergency sirens echoing through metal corridors and a voice repeating over and over, "If you hear knocking from level 4, pretend you didn't." And as the recording continued, the voices became increasingly panicked, describing doors opening by themselves deep underground and shadowy figures standing motionless at the ends of hallways watching them from the dark, until suddenly the tape cut to complete silence for nearly 30 seconds before a man whispered something that made my blood run cold. They learned how to mimic our voices, and right as he finished speaking, someone behind me softly said my name in the exact voice of my mother, even though I was completely alone inside the archive. But when I turned around, there was nobody there except the long concrete hallway outside the room, stretching endlessly into darkness while the bunker speakers overhead crackled too. Life with distorted static, followed by a calm, automated announcement repeating, "Level 4 containment failure detected," causing every light in the corridor to suddenly switch red as heavy blast doors somewhere below groaned open for the first time in years. And before I could even process what was happening, I heard distant footsteps echoing upward through the stairwell beneath the archive, dozens of them at once, slow and uneven like injured people dragging themselves across metal stairs, while every old cassette player in the room abruptly powered on by itself and began playing overlapping recordings of terrified screams, emergency broadcasts, and workers begging to be let out. Yet through all the noise, one sound became impossible to ignore: soft knocking coming from inside the sealed storage room at the far end of the archive that employees had specifically warned me never to enter under any circumstances. But as the knocking slowly grew louder and more desperate, the bunker around me seemed to change because the hallways no longer matched the layout map hanging on the wall. Doors appeared where none had existed before, and every clock inside the archive froze permanently at 2:17 a.m., while faint human silhouettes started appearing behind the frosted glass windows of empty office doors, only to vanish whenever the lights flickered. And although every instinct told me to run, the only exit staircase had somehow disappeared behind a solid concrete wall that absolutely had not been there earlier, leaving me trapped underground as the distorted announcement overhead repeated again and again, "Do not respond to familiar voices," while the knocking inside the forbidden storage room suddenly stopped completely, replaced by a long, unbearable silence that somehow felt worse, because deep down I knew whatever had been trapped inside was no longer behind the door anymore. And moments later, the cassette player beside me crackled back to life with a final damaged recording dated only 3 minutes ahead of the current time, where a terrified version of my own voice whispered, "If you're hearing this, do not turn around," right before I felt someone gently place a cold hand on my shoulder from behind.